And if the US were to hold 2 million Bitcoin, and that Bitcoin goes to $20 million over 10, 20, 30 years, then now all of a sudden the US would be holding at $20 million, roughly 40 trillion plus. Well, the federal debt today is 35 trillion and growing. And there's no way the government can service that debt at current inflation levels, interest rate levels.
Yeah.
Right? And so the minute the US does it, they will now have the ability to project power in the Bitcoin. If the US does it, then everybody else is going to have to do it.
Bitcoin, the world's largest cryptocurrency by market cap, is fast approaching sovereign reserve status asset, according to recent observations from Fred Thiel, the chairman and chief executive officer of Marathon Digital Holdings. In a recent discussion with popular Bitcoiner and podcaster Robert Breedlove, Thiel talks about how Bitcoin is making a lot of waves in the US political scene, especially as we draw closer to the presidential elections in November, with prominent candidates like former US President Donald Trump proudly endorsing Bitcoin and pledging to build a US Bitcoin reserve. Thiel is optimistic about the eventual adoption of the leading cryptocurrency as a worldwide sovereign reserve asset in no distant future. During his conversation with Breedlove, Thiel observes that many of the previous headwinds preventing companies like Marathon from freely holding Bitcoin, including the lack of regulatory clarity and unfair accounting rules, are being resolved. This means more and more companies will follow the path of the top mining company and Michael Saylor's MicroStrategy to adopt a Bitcoin strategy, voraciously buying the leading cryptocurrency and holding it on their balance sheet to avoid the gradual debasement of fiat currencies like the US dollar. Since it announced it was resuming purchasing Bitcoin in July, Marathon has continued to accumulate the leading cryptocurrency, buying an additional 4,144 Bitcoin at an average price of $59,500 per Bitcoin last month. At the moment, the top mining company now holds over 25,000 Bitcoin worth nearly $1.5 billion. Thiel believes more companies will adopt this strategy, and when the US starts building a Bitcoin reserve, other countries will immediately follow, taking the price of the leading digital assets to unprecedented new highs. As we bring you clips from the interview, please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. Everything you do helps with the YouTube algorithm and immensely contributes to the channel's growth. Thanks, and enjoy the video.
I think people are beginning to open their eyes. People who run public companies are constantly worried about optics, right? I mean, they have their board they report to, they have their shareholders that they're fiduciaries for. And so it's not like you run your own business. If it's, if you make a decision to hold Bitcoin using your treasury for your business, that's your decision, right? And maybe you have some business partners, and so you guys get together and you decide. It's very different as a public company because you have regulatory issues. And up until not long ago, the FASB rules, the rules about accounting, were that you could only impair Bitcoin when you had it on your balance sheet. You could never market to market, which meant that you couldn't report a fair estimation of the value of your Bitcoin in your financials, which meant you couldn't borrow again. There are all sorts of limitations that it causes. Now you can. And so that was a major step. We adopted it for the 2023 fiscal year, which ended in December of last year. And when we reported our earnings, after our first quarter, we had a huge gain because we had been marking down the value of our Bitcoin for so many years that all of a sudden there was a big gain. So, non-cash gain. But so now companies all of a sudden are seeing that from an accounting perspective, you can hold it. Obviously, from a regulatory perspective, Bitcoin's deemed a commodity, so it's doesn't suffer from the issues. And one of the last real barriers outside of just optics was how do you buy and hold it? Right? Corporate treasurers don't want to have to worry about self-custody. And even us as a Bitcoin company, we use third-party custodians. Part of it is we want to be able to sleep at night. We don't want to have to worry about somebody sequestering one of our employees. Right? And we want to have the ability to make sure it's in multiple places so we can use it however we need to use it, if we need to use it. If the U.S. government's going to get ornery with me. There's all sorts of stuff they can do.
Sure.
The holding the Bitcoin, we're not exactly going to get on an airplane and leave the country with our Bitcoin anytime soon. So we prefer to keep it someplace where it's insured and it's taken care of and we don't have to worry about it. So now that you can go and buy ETFs, for example, as a company, it's become a lot easier. You don't have to worry about security. Yeah. You don't have to worry about all sorts of things. And as you get a little bit more sophisticated, you can then think about, okay, maybe I should even dip my toes into buying mining companies or MicroStrategy or other companies, so I get a little bit more beta. And it's very interesting. One of our investors is the state of Wisconsin's investment board. This is a pension fund. City of Houston's Firemen's Pension Fund is also another one. They are now, organizations like this are now seeing, hey, Bitcoin has this track record of over time continually growing in value. And why shouldn't we hold it? And now there are ways they can hold it easily. And you're starting to see with the ETFs a little bit of institutional investing. But the floodgates haven't opened yet because most of the large wirehouses, the Merrill Lynch's, et cetera, they still haven't passed compliance on these ETFs. But the minute they do, and my understanding is many of them are in the process and it's going to be 6 to 9 months, but even if it's a year out, you've got $40+ trillion of pension money sitting out there. I've always kind of thought, hey, a 1% allocation would be insane. But when I talk to some of the advisors at these big banks who are advising these pension funds, and I said, what are the pension funds saying their allocation would be? And I'm being told it's 2 to 3 to 4%.
Wow.
That's a huge number.
Yeah.
And so it gets me back to this thing, okay, it makes sense to own a lot of Bitcoin.
Yes.
Because other people are going to want to own a lot of Bitcoin.
The US spot Bitcoin ETFs have been making quite a lot of waves among institutional investors since the US Securities and Exchange Commission approved them at the beginning of the year. Despite a few stumbling blocks, including the recent $1.2 billion in outflows recorded by the funds, investors like Thiel are still optimistic that the funds, especially BlackRock's IBIT and Fidelity FBTC, will continue to give access to billions, then trillions of dollars to spill into Bitcoin and the rest of the digital asset space in the coming months and years. According to the renowned business executive and investor, traditional investors like pension funds and large hedge funds are prepared to invest up to 4% of their massive portfolios into the Bitcoin ETFs as soon as major wirehouses start listing them. Thiel is not the only one looking forward to this historic moment, which Bitcoin ETF issuers like Bitwise's Matt Hugin and ARK Invest's Cathie Wood have predicted will help easily send Bitcoin prices above $100,000 per coin. Here are more clips from the video.
The U.S. is the single largest holder of gold in the world. The dollar's not backed by gold, but gold allows the U.S. to project power into financial markets. Other countries hold gold as their reserve. And actually, it was the holding of gold that drove Nixon to decouple the dollar from gold because other countries were withdrawing their gold from the U.S. system because they saw the spending that was going on at that period of time, and they thought the U.S. would go bankrupt. So the U.S. government holds a lot of gold. They're the largest landowner in this country. They own about 28% of the land in the country. And what recently happened was the expiration of the petrodollar, which was this agreement where the commodity producers would price their commodity in dollars in protection for, in exchange for protection from the U.S., and then they would invest that in treasuries. Right? That's now gone. And so we've seen the U.S. as a reserve currency drop in significance, and it's now down in sub 50% as a holding asset. The Chinese now buy gold instead of treasuries. Japan, which was one of the biggest buyers of U.S. treasuries as they were going through their recent financial situation, have now also tapered. Comically, one of the largest buyers of treasury bills, which are short-term, is Tether. Right? They're the sixth largest buyer. They buy at a nation-state level.
How ironic.
Right? And so the U.S. needs to fund its debt somehow. And if people aren't buying dollars or putting things in dollars, that is a precarious situation. So that leaves the U.S. with only a couple of alternatives. They either have to let the dollar drop in value significantly and have high inflation so they can inflate away the debt, but that would be disastrous. The other thing they can do is they can invest in an asset like Bitcoin, which will over time appreciate in value. And if it can appreciate at a rate faster than the U.S. total debt appreciates, then now you have something you can use to offset the debt over time. And if the U.S. were to hold 2 million Bitcoin, and that Bitcoin goes to $20 million over 10, 20, 30 years, then now all of a sudden the U.S. would be holding at $20 million, roughly 40 trillion plus. Well, the federal debt today is 35 trillion and growing. There's no way the government can service that debt at current inflation levels, interest rate levels.
Yeah.
Right? And so the minute the U.S. does it, they will now have the ability to project power in the Bitcoin market because they will have pricing power because of their supply, just like they do with the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Why does the administration sell oil out of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve? To drop the price of gasoline, to lower inflation. Right? Why does the Strategic Petroleum Reserve exist? Well, it was to protect us from price shocks in the outside market. Well, today the U.S. is arguably the largest oil producer in the world. And so they have the ability to not suffer the consequences of high international oil prices in the same way. But if the U.S. does it, then everybody else is going to have to do it, because you can't be a country and not have a strategic reserve of Bitcoin if all the other countries have it.
Right.
And countries like Russia, China, and others look at Bitcoin as a neutral currency that isn't controlled by a government or a country, that allows them to trade independent of any sanctions the U.S. would ever do. And so if the U.S. wants to keep them from trading in violation of sanctions, they have to also have enough Bitcoin so they can impact that market.
According to Thiel, buying and holding Bitcoin will soon become a matter of national security for nations, comparable to how we view commodities like gold and oil today. However, this can only happen if a developed nation like the United States adopts a Bitcoin strategy and starts buying Bitcoin periodically, challenging other countries like Russia and China to make similar moves. Thiel believes adopting a Bitcoin standard will be a wise step for the US, as it would help resolve the country's massive $35 trillion national debt in no time. Not only will the US be able to retain its status as the world's largest economy and superpower for much longer, but adopting a Bitcoin standard will also help us get back on the growth trajectory and give us back the American dream. Please share your thoughts on Fred Thiel's interview in the comments section below. If you agree with his analysis and assertions, also remember to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. Everything you do helps with the YouTube algorithm and immensely supports our growth. Thanks for watching.